So my name is Ankur. I'm going to talk about status today and how we are approaching human behavior from a data perspective, which is how do you understand people, how do you understand behavior, and how do you make sense of it. But in a sense, in a way that makes sense, kind of not just going into too deep psychology, because there is a bit of it, but going into data. So can we use that from a data science perspective? It's not going to be an incredibly technical talk, but it will be very technical. It'll be technical enough that you'll be able to ask questions all the way from neural nets to how do you approach it, but I'm not going to go into algorithms right now because that's not the point. We're going to talk about three new things. We're going to talk about why the world has changed, what's actually changed in the last few years. Then we're going to talk about predicting humans. Can you actually predict humans with data? Is that science fiction? Is it NSA or is it real? And then lastly, we're going to talk about tackling humanization, which is as and when more technology gets humanized, how do you deal with it? And how do you even go about, as data scientists, how do you go about making that useful in your current particular role? So when you look at, when you look at this, this is now very fast becoming a symbolic image in the world of cybersecurity. Does anyone in the room know what this particular image represents? Well, so clearly everyone is very keenly interested. Makes me wonder how many of you are actually in the database. But I'm not going to check. We do have it, but yeah, never mind that. But life is short, have an affair, that's what they said. And well, not soon after, they did get breached. Ashley Madison is a classic example of a very public, very prominent data breach that, if not for anything, it's not about the data that was breached, it's actually a lot of people who got impacted. So when you think about Ashley Madison, you think about all the people who are on the site, all the people who are using the services. What you don't think about is people whose families were impacted, people who lost their jobs, and so on and so forth. But what a lot of people do not know about Ashley Madison is that when you look at the actual cyber attack that happened on Ashley Madison, the data leak, which sounded all exciting and juicy, but when you look at how it happened, it was actually someone inside the organization. So the CEO, the group CEO, Noel Biderman, he made a comment that said, I know who did it, and I've got their profile right in front of me. It was an employee at the company itself. Now, obviously, we're never going to hear the true details of what exactly happened. But what that goes on to say is, we really need to understand our own people a little better. In that capacity, I often ask the question, what is it that Sony, NSA, Ashley Madison, what is it that they do have in common? And if I ask you guys, what is it that they have in common? And I'm assuming for people who are that interested in data, this would be a little more obvious than the last one. So what do you think? What would be the common thing between all of them?
Data breach.
They have been breached, absolutely right. But there's a more specific thing they have in common. They've all been hacked through employees. So it's almost well known at this point, but not entirely, that in all these three cases, if not the employee being malicious, it was through employees or through people that they were breached. So it was either someone being stupid or someone getting compromised, or well, someone being bad in some cases. That brings the question, who the hell am I to talk about all of this? So I'm going to give you a very, very quick 5-second introduction on me, and hopefully going to skip through it because it's not that relevant, to be completely honest. So my name is Ankur. I'm the CEO of StatusToday, founded the company, know a little bit about data science here and there, spent a bit of time at Microsoft, studied a bit of psychology, and then started the company. That's kind of all you need to know about me. There's a bunch of logos there because it's fun. At StatusToday, what we do is we try to understand behavior. We try to understand employee behavior. But to do that, we actually look at human behavior in particular to see, can you understand security? Can you understand engagement? Can you actually make sense of productivity? A rather fluffy concept. And we've been relatively good at it. I mean, in the 1 year that we've run, and this is my company pitch, by the way, right now. But it's in the 1 year that we've been running, we've been recognized, got partnership, got press. People called us out for what we're doing. Because, and that's what I'm going to talk about now, why we consider what we're doing to be relatively new. When you look at organizations, when you look at data, often what we forget is people are the biggest assets. In any organization, in any company, in any group, in this room right now, the most valuable thing is a group of people, if I can call the group of people a thing, but maybe. But at the same time, they're certainly the biggest threat as well. So when you look in the world of cybersecurity, which is one aspect of human behavior, they represent a massive amount of threat. They cause millions in damages, and I'm not just talking aggregate. The average cost of a single data incident caused by people, insiders, is in the millions right now. And more and more and more, PwC currently estimates more than 70% of all incidents, data-related breaches, cyber attacks, are happening due to insiders. Mostly because, why go around hacking the mainframe, as they call it, when you can just hack the person? It's a lot simpler, and you'll see why. In the natural world, we're just as scary because, well, that's the graph of human population growth alongside the extinction of species. So, we tend to be a big threat. And we tend to ask questions, are we alone? It's a fundamental question that we've asked for centuries, and we finally have an answer. We are not alone, not yet, but looking at that graph, we will be very soon. And what's funny is there's a lot of information out there. There's almost too much information on the internet, out in the science, out in data. We just heard from True AI that, a lot of corporations have put some effort into collecting historic information and data. But it's not about the data. It's not about the information. It's almost noise at that point. We ingested 150 million events last week, but why? It doesn't, it's not just about ingesting anything and everything. You have to become very selective. So what we call out is you really need to understand people before you understand data. Understanding people is inherently difficult. We take the shortcut. We say, you log in 3 times a week from this machine. You typically wake up at 7 in the morning, and then you do some work, and then you go home, and then you do some more work. But what we don't do is trying to figure out why. Why do they do that? What is it that they're trying to achieve? And that's at the heart of understanding people before you understand data. Funny thing is, data can help you understand that. Data has the power to do that. It's also the biggest liability, employees, people. They're not just the biggest asset. They're the massive threat and a massive liability. Did you know that 9 out of 10 senior managers feel that they're vulnerable to an insider attack, meaning they don't trust their own team? So you talk to people, they're like, I trust my team, I love them, I like what they do. But in most cases, they feel that there is a possibility someone in their team might go malicious. Most companies, and this is a fun one, do not realize it, but most of us, including myself for that matter, spend roughly up to 15 hours a month criticizing either our boss or the organization or the work. In my case, probably a bit more, but that depends, who you're talking about. But, when you start understanding why people do what they do, and you start applying data to that, you start seeing patterns that would become a lot more obvious as we go along. When I talk about human threat, it's really complicated. Why is human behavior complicated? Well, human behavior is complicated because humans are complicated. But when you look at segments of it, new employees, people who've just joined, they don't know what they're doing. They're going to make mistakes. People who are about to resign, they don't have motivation to do the same amount of work that they used to before. Older employees, now that's a controversial one. Why does age matter? But it does. Younger employees who are more often than not arrogant because they think that they know how to use technology. Often they don't. They know how to use technology but not processes. And that introduces risks to an organization because they don't follow rules. In the exact same people, I genuinely believe in the idea of not making stupid people famous. In the context of elections, I don't think I need to say much. But the same way contractors, people who inherently not involved with the organization. So now we are going into who is it that's doing something. So we are talking about, okay, you're a contractor. You have no inherent interest in making a successful project, as much as we like to believe otherwise. Disgruntled employees, hey, I'm really angry at my boss or my work or my job today. What the hell, I'm going to do something bad. In Boston, there was a very interesting survey done when a data company went around to 2,000 bartenders in the bars and asked them that if I give you 1,000 pounds, well, dollars in their case, would you give me the username and password for your internal system for 15 minutes? Out of 2,000 bartenders they talked to, 60% said, sure, 15 minutes. What's the harm you can do? I'll give it to you for 15 minutes. Now, being data people, being smart people, forget data people, 15 minutes is more than enough to do everything. That's how it typically is. We mapped out human threat at the organization to understand what it really means. So human threat is not about bad people. Bad people do not represent human threat. Human threat is about stupid people. hey, in the world of controversial things I'm saying, that's probably out there. But the reason I say that is all of us are really, really stupid. We all do mistakes, and we do it more often than we think we do. Sending the wrong email, leaving the USB stick somewhere, printing something that we don't need, accidentally leaving it at the printer, weak passwords, wrong folder, forgetting the laptop, and then going really bad, being unhappy, quitting with data, fraud, malicious stuff, working with state actors. It is not China, Russia, US, or whatever country we believe is about to hack the next country. It's actually us who's causing most of the damage in most of the companies because of the accidental and innocent, because that happens more often than the malicious stuff. It really is all about the human. It really is critical to understand people. But how do you go about understanding people? Because I'm not here to give a lecture on psychology. I mean, sure, that'd be fun, but that's not the point. What I'm here to tell you is, to understand people, you have to understand two things. And data people generally are very good at this one, which is spotting abnormal stuff, which is what is the outlier, what is the anomaly. But what we really forget is when you spot the abnormal, you have intrinsically done something much, much more valuable. You have figured out what is normal. And that normal is where the behavior lies, and you can use that really, really in a powerful way to drive business decisions, to improve things, to reduce threat. We found that the key lies in three things. One is fingerprinting, understanding what makes people unique. What is it that you do that makes you you? Second is using artificial intelligence, because, well, no one can crunch that kind of data at scale. You need smarter algorithms, you need a big data solution, you need machine learning algorithms, different kinds, not just supervised and unsupervised. You have to come up with innovative approaches. And lastly, the one thing that has been missing in data all along, you need to use the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of research from human psychology. Human psychology tells us that when people do something, they're very likely to do something afterwards. So I'll give you a very easy example. If I hold a gun, I'm likely to shoot. If I don't have a gun, I cannot shoot. Relatively easy. But psychology gives you those basics. And then you use data on top of that, saying, I know the sequence of events, let's use data to measure it, and then use likelihood on top of that. We found an approach that works for us. We collect throwaway information, log files, metadata, stuff that usually you would not even record, or in most cases, if you're recording, you'll actually discard very soon. We take that, we aggregate it across the board, and we collect that on a human-centric layer. So being able to say, you're not mapping the system, you're mapping the human at this point. And then you learn on top of that, and that's where you predict, identify both normal and malicious human behavior. And then finally, we provide for exploring and forensics, which is, okay, what the hell is going on? If something bad happens, can I explore, can I identify the good things, the bad things, and can I actually spot the incidents? In that case, let's talk about David. He's a smart but regular employee, and we'll see why that's relevant. What we notice, and this is actually a real case study that we had from one of the client accounts, we noticed unusual activity on David's account on a certain day, 27th of June, so not long ago, and that's actually a real date from our system, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning. On that particular day, what we notice is we have a bunch of different modules. So we're trying to emulate how human behavior works, which is trying to understand humans the way humans understand humans. So when I talk to you, I see something, I hear something, I feel something, and I'm thinking about something. There are a lot of independent things that are going on. And each of our modules that we've built does that independent, smart thing. So here we're looking at location. David usually does not travel to the US, let alone in the same day. So this is only 27th of June. He's traveled between US, UK, and Netherlands in the same day. We know physically that's not possible, but hey, there's no rocket science in that. Google does that every time you log in from a new computer. So that's not rocket science. But what is important here to understand is, hey, even though he doesn't usually travel to the US or that particular location, sometimes in the past we have noticed him going to that region. So maybe not the city, but we know US as a whole has happened in the past. It might be a VPN location. He might not be physically there, but we know that there's a history there. But being able to say adaptively that a certain new location is new, whereas another new location is not new, based on the person's own history and people's history in general, allows you to finally say that the red one is bad, whereas the blue one is not, whereas both of them are physically impossible. Same way as time-based, looking at the entire day on an average, we know that between 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, usually David comes to work. I mean, it's a bit early from my standards, but Anyhow, between 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, David usually starts working. So it's expected that there's high volume of activity, drops down around lunch, post-lunch coffee, post-coffee maybe more work. But it's actually what this module is telling us is, look, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock is not bad. It sounds likely that this person is doing something. So now here's a module, like humans, which is not flagging up. It's saying that things are okay. Then you go forward, you look at the amount of activity happening at that time. So when you look at 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, the red line represents the actual volume of activity that's happening, not just the average activity for that particular day. And on the right, on this graph, you're looking at the probability of that happening for that time. So what you look at it is they're real spikes. So whatever is happening at that time seems to be happening in large quantities, and that in general does not happen for David. It's very unlikely for him to be doing that amount of stuff at that hour in those intervals. So it's a bit more complicated, but what we are saying is it seems really unusual relative to his or her own history. So activity spikes at unusual hours are rare. So now we've got 3 modules which have told us that, okay, look, these things combined tell me something might or might not be going on. 2 of the things tell us that something is bad. 1 says something is not bad. You're starting to see where I'm going with this, which is exactly how the human brain operates, which is we look at different inputs. You look at different sources of data and you combine them to make a decision. So these are actually the actual graphs for exactly that same day. We're looking at a variety of different things. So not just location, we're looking at novelty. How many new people do you interact with on a given day? If suddenly you decide to become super social and all your life you've talked to 10 people in total, that is not right. That doesn't just happen. Looking at location profile, communication, time of the day, peer index. If you're a salesperson, you're usually going to be communicative. If you're an engineer, you usually like to get stuff done, relatively speaking. So, it's all of that ties into each of these modules. And then each of these modules gives us a measure of that event, of that day, on whether it's normal or abnormal. That finally allows us to basically call out something that we truly, truly believe in, which is we are all unique, but we are all predictably unique. And that predictability is not at an individual level, it's at a group level. As a group, we are all predictable. As an individual, we are not. So I could predict that given that you are all in this room, you all like data, you all understand basic science, you all understand engineering, and you all speak English. Well, if you don't speak English, we got a problem. But that is predictable. But I don't know you individually, but I know you as a group. And that can be done in the context of your role, the work you do, the title you have, the country you live in, the company you work for, without ever knowing you at all. And that predictability has massive benefits. You can understand connectors and influencers, so you can actually communicate better. Instead of trying to spray information, you focus on the people who disseminate information. So we all know someone in our social group who organizes the parties. So if you need a party done, you go to that person. Same logic applies. You're able to see patterns in performance. So instead of the shy person being biased against because the manager just doesn't know what they're up to, and they get consistently bad reviews because, oh, I think you're doing a good job, I'm not sure about it. You finally have data to back it up. So it's just no longer about being loud. You're able to see sensitive access, anomalies, changes in patterns when people are not being themselves. They're about to be compromised, they're being stupid, or they're being malicious. And then in research, you can actually also, to some degree, understand morale, understand stress. So what you're able to do is, hey, this set of people I know belong to a team that's always happy and they seem to be doing a great job. What is fundamentally different about them from this other team that makes them so happy? Is it that they work less hours? Is it that they don't work? Is it that they take Fridays off? But you can answer those questions using data, but you're able to finally get into the place where you're really understanding people to drive change. And from that point of view, understanding the normal is the first step. So for us, we start by understanding normal, looking at what is it that people do. And that's much more than what people like to call surveillance or monitoring. That's actually finally letting people understand people and using data for that. So letting bias go away from business decisions. The next step is identifying patterns for performance and productivity. So being able to say, what is it that makes the best people better than other people, and then training the people who are not there yet into those habits. And finally, when you do that, you're able to map out the threats, the anomalies, the people who are not doing well, or the people who are, to say, this is where my threats are going to lie, this is where suspicious activity is going to be, this particular action seems out of place, not because it's out of place for you, but because no salesperson has ever downloaded the entire source code of the product. And that just is not right. And that's why threats have humanized, that's why technology has humanized, that's why there's no point hacking the system anymore, because it's very easy to hack the people. And technology needs to continue doing that. Stuff you build as you go around with data solutions, stuff we build has to continue on this path. And we found great cases on that. And human-centric technology, the way we see it, is the future. Everything is getting personalized. There's AI in everything. AI is the next big data. Big data was the next internet. So AI is no longer going to be a thing. What it will be is everything will be smarter. So how do you make sure that smartness is actually human-focused rather than anti-human or against us? And from that perspective, when you actually understand the behavior, when you protect the sensitive data, when you handle these threats, are you finally able to stay ahead in what I call the intelligence war? Unfortunately, it sounds spooky, it sounds controversial, it sounds weird, and it sounds scary, because it is, but the choice is not exactly there, because it's either you do it or someone else will. So you're either going to be on the side which doesn't know what's going on, or the side that will know what's going on. And it's always better to know what's going on and decide whether you want to use it for good or bad than to not know. And that's fundamentally where it all stands. And that's where I conclude usually, which is understand people before you understand data. Data has a lot to tell, but when you actually look at the right stuff, you finally get insights that you can drive massive change in organizations across the board, small to large. And that's where I stop for questions. Thank you.